everyone, and welcome to today's video. This is my long-awaited 5 things that I hate about my car, and I've got a lot to talk about. It's been a while since I've made a video, and that is partly due to the fact that I've been having nothing but issues with this car. So without further ado, is that the term? I don't know. Let's just get right into 5 things that I hate about this car. Okay, so I've pulled over and hopefully the audio will be okay. I've pulled over in a lay-by. The road is like 100 yards away, but it's a really busy road, so if you can hear the cars passing, I apologise. But yeah, so it's been a long time since I made a video. It's been around 5 weeks, and I did actually make a version of this video probably 2 weeks ago. And it was called 2 Things I Hated About My RS3, because at that time there was only 2 things. However, since then things haven't been going too great, and I must say I think my overall RS ownership experience has been affected by what's been going on. So I just had enough, you know. So let me explain. So as some of you know, I bought this car in December last year, so I've had the car for around 6 months. I think it's 6 months and 2 days I've owned the car. And for that 6 months, the car's gone into Audi every month, at least once. And I know what you're thinking, that's probably because you're one of those people that they hear a noise, they take it in, but that is not the case. The car's been going in for the same reason repeatedly. And there are 2 of them, and they are 2 things that I hate. So the first is the thing I hate most about this car, which is the squeaky brakes. I have mentioned this in videos before, it's still going on. Initially, when I took the car into Audi, they explained that there would be a caliper update fitted to my car. And I thought, oh great, that's going to be it. You know, that will be right why the brakes are squeaking. They took the car in and they discovered that actually I already had the updated brake calipers, so they didn't replace them. So instead they just cleaned the discs, and that did the job for about 100 miles, and then the brakes were squeaking again. I took the car back into Audi and they said, we're not able to replicate the issue. We'll clean the discs again. They did that, and again the brakes started squeaking after a few 100 miles. So this all led to me complaining officially to Audi Finance to say, look, I'm paying quite a lot of money for this car. I don't really feel like people are taking me seriously, and I especially don't want to be paying all this money for a car that has squeaky brakes. Like, what is going on? So they investigated again, and this time they actually took the wheels off, they took the calipers off, took them apart, and they discovered that one of the brake pads wasn't sitting flush, so it was actually grinding against the disc and dried out, which was then causing the squeak. So thankfully they were able to figure out what was causing the sound and have replaced it, and I've only had the car back for a couple of days, and touch wood, so far so good, the brakes are not squeaking. So I hope it stays that way. But that has been, like, honestly, the most annoying thing about owning this car for the past 6 months is the squeaky brakes. And I read online, I see a lot of people are changing their brake pads to aftermarket brake pads, which, you know, maybe I should just do, but at the same time I don't feel like I should have to. The next thing, and I swear there was someone walking there, but it's a crow. The next thing that has also been an ongoing issue and is still an ongoing issue, and is the second thing that I hate about this car, is the oil consumption. There is something wrong with my car. It goes through oil. I've had to top the oil up 7 times in 6 months. Admittedly, I have done close to 10,000 miles in this car now. So I know that's probably a higher mileage than most RS3s 6 months in. But even still, 7 times covering that mileage is just crazy. There's no leaks, there's no patches on the floor. We've checked the under tray, there's no oil getting caught anywhere. It's a real weird mystery. So if any of you have any experience of your car using a lot of oil and you've actually been able to figure it out, please do leave a comment, because Audi are still unsure. So now the car is in the process of running through a oil consumption test. So as soon as the oil runs low, I take it back in, and they then use a computer to compare what the car should be using, how much my car is using, and try to diagnose an issue. I completely respect that there is a process that Audi need to follow, but to me this is a bit of a waste of time, because we know that we're topping the oil up often. I should also explain that the 7 times I've topped the oil up, 4 of them have been with this Audi dealer, and they've actually seen that the car is on the minimum of the minimum. It's the lowest it can be. And what worries me is the engine, the oil light, is not coming on. So usually the reason I know it's low on oil is because I can smell it. So that's just really concerning to me, because I don't want to be driving a car low on oil in this type of temperature. You know, it's the summertime, the sun is out for once, so it's getting really hot. I just don't want to be fucking my car up, basically. So again, touch of wood, hopefully this oil consumption leads to some kind of formal diagnosis and hopefully a solution, so that we can figure out what is going on. Now, as I mentioned, I've only had the car for a couple of days, and the reason for that is because it was in the Audi garage, and it was when they were investigating the brake calipers. Now, whilst they had the car up in the air, they were able to just really have a good look underneath. First of all, a piece of the underneath of the car is missing. It would seem that unfortunately I hit something at some point, because there was like a carcass smeared across the bottom of my car, which wasn't great. Which may also explain the occasional burning smell that I can smell when driving the car. But whilst the car was up in the air, they were able to see that the tyres, my 2 front tyres specifically, had worn in a very odd place. And this leads me to number 3, the third thing I hate about this car, which is Audi's service. So the 2 front tyres had worn on the inside of each tyre, and the driver's side front tyre was so bad that it had worn all the way down to the beading. I do a fair amount of driving in this car. You know, I ferry my daughter around, and all that kept going through my head was, if I had a blowout on a 60-mile-an-hour road, that could have potentially been, catastrophic. So I was quite pissed off, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't think that I should have to pay for the tyres. Now, the reality of owning an RS car is you're going to go through tyres. You're going to have to pay for tyres. That's just a part of ownership. But not 6 months in and not 10,000 miles in. Now, what they initially tried to say is that it's due to my driving style. Now, as I just mentioned, I ferry my daughter around a lot, so I don't really get to drive this car as some other RS owners would drive their cars. Most of the time, I drive it around in dynamic, but, I have to take corners slowly, etc., because I don't want to be flinging her head all over the place. So they tried saying it was my driving style, which kind of pissed me off. I thought, surely the tyres are meant to withstand people who do drive their cars, who really drive them, So I was a little annoyed. But my argument was, what kind of driving style would wear the inside of a tyre? And not just, it was on the corner as well, so it was on the inside of the corner. Now, I'll just cut the story short. I ended up paying for the tyres. They were £234 per tyre. I am sure you could probably get them cheaper somewhere else online, but that included fitting. And what Audi also did as a gesture of goodwill is they ensured that all four wheels were aligned. Now, they didn't tell me whether they were misaligned or not, and I reckon the reason they didn't tell me that is because I think the car came with misaligned wheels, and that's what's causing the tyres to wear unevenly, because the two rear tyres are 62% worn, so they're still fine. Again, I did read online, a lot of the roads around here are country lanes and they're very uneven, so that can cause tyre wear in odd places, but yeah, crazy. And the reason Audi's service bothered me is because despite being very patient over the past 6 months and despite explaining to them endlessly, you know, my concerns and my issues with this car, they just always seem to want to point the finger back at me and tell me it's my fault somehow. And, you know, maybe the tyres are my fault, but when you've been dealing with a car that hasn't quite been what you expected for nearly 6 months, the last thing you want to be told is, because you drive like a tit, you've fucked your tyres. Because that's basically what they told me, and it just got to me a lot. Now, because I kicked up a bit of a fuss, they then offered to do the wheel alignment, but, you know, do I know whether or not they actually did it? No. Is there any proof to show that they did it? No. So for all I know, they could just be lying and saying they did and they haven't. I mean, I'm sure they have, but, you know, it just wasn't the service I expected. So the fourth thing that really bothers me about this car is more of just a general day-to-day ownership of the car and driving it every day, using it as a daily, commuting to and from work. Just something that I have noticed over the last 6 months is when you're driving in dynamic, even if you can't drive the car in sport mode without absolutely gunning it. And what I mean by sport mode is when you have the gearbox in S. If you have it in dynamic in D, the turbo lag is just crazy. It's crazy, especially at lower speeds. You know, coming out of corners, it's just like, come on, like, please. And yeah, I know I could put it in manual, I could keep it in S, but like I said, second gear when you've got it in S is a long old gear, so you just scream for no reason. And the other thing that bothers me, and the reason I mention this, is because I can get around, you know, the turbo lag. But the reason I mention it is because a lot of the roads I drive on are very hilly, and this car has the exact same issue that my S3 did. When it's going up hills, it doesn't change down automatically, so you're just lagging along. You have to put it in manual if it's quite a steep hill. And secondly, when you're going down a hill, it doesn't know that even though your foot might not be on the accelerator, because the car's, of course, speeding up, it just stays in one gear. So again, you have to change the gear automatically. And I know these are small things, man. It's a small thing. It doesn't keep me up at night. But when you do it every day, multiple times a day, it can become quite tedious. So it's not something that I would necessarily say is a real hate. I mean, none of these are. But it is quite tedious having to do that all the time. And then finally, I would say that the fifth thing that I hate about this car, and this is going to sound really odd, and this is how you know that I'm clutching at straws for the last two, is the attention the car gets. Now, don't get me wrong, if I'm in a car park and people are looking, or people give me the thumbs up, and sometimes people wave, and sometimes people ask me to rev it so that it pops and bangs, that's all cool. I'm cool to do that. I have no issue with that. But it's the attention I get on the roads which really bothers me. I don't think this will change from here on. You know, if I get an RS6, if I get an R8, if I get whatever car I get, I think this is always a challenge that people who have fast cars have, which is the attention. And it's not always from Ferraris or Porsches. Unfortunately, it's from people who own Civic Type Rs or Fiesta STs or Corsa SXIs or Polo GTIs. These type of cars make an active effort to try and drive faster than me. A majority of the time I pay no attention to these people, because what I found is that they seem to think because they're doing 60 and a 30 that they're faster than me. I just don't get it. Knowing full well that if we were to be at on a track, just they would get annihilated. If it were country lanes, they'd get annihilated. But no, it's always in the middle of a high street, or it's always in the middle of a residential street that they decide they want to overtake me, drive dangerously, and just really piss me off, to be honest. Because it doesn't bother me that they get in front, or that, you know, oh my god, your 2 litre diesel remapped is now suddenly a fucking 458. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that they drive dangerously around me. And I cannot tell you the number of close encounters I've had with people where they've either nearly crashed into me, or I've nearly seen them crash into something else. And the worst case I've had of this, or the worst cases I should say, are fucking Audi drivers. They seem to want to gun it more than anyone else. One particular experience stands out as probably the worst exchange of kind of road rage I've had. It wasn't physical, it was just verbal. But just an Audi A5 just acted like an absolute twat. Absolute twat. Like, they were doing easily 100 plus, easy, on a 60 road, just to get in front of me, only to get stuck behind somebody else, so that when I eventually caught up along with all of the other traffic, I went into a different lane, because we came to a roundabout where the left lane is straight and the right lane turns right. They were in the wrong lane, so what they decided to do was, again, of course, to stay in front of me, was to cut me up on the roundabout. And I reckon that a Ford Focus was probably a centimetre from hitting my car, from rear-ending me, because I had to brake because this person decided they wanted to cut over. And then, yeah, they just kept getting stuck behind another car, because what happens is when you go straight, you then enter a series of roads which are essentially national, but there's a lot of houses off of the road, so people tend to drive slower, and they just kept getting stuck behind cars. They tried to go around the car, realised there's cars coming the other way, so they'd tuck back in at the last minute. Like, just fucking crazy, honestly, crazy. And they did all of that, and I'm not joking, we got to the town at the same time. So they did all of that shit for no reason. But those are the 5 things. So just to recap: squeaky brakes, engine oil, Audi's service, the occasional turbo lag, and the attention the car gets. Those are the 5 things that I currently hate about this car. Other than those 5 things, it's a great car. It still makes me smile. The sound is still incredible. I still enjoy driving the car. I still love the car, love the way the car looks. So if you've watched this far, thank you very much for watching the video. If you have any experience of any of the 5 things that I mentioned, please share them in the comments. I'm always more than happy to talk to any of you, whether that's positive or negative. Just let me know. And I do plan on making more videos. I'm going to be posting more regularly. I'm not just going to, disappear again. It was a weird time. My mind wasn't right. But I'm going to be posting more regularly moving forward. And until the next video, peace.